Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of The Cup, Interviews, brought to you by Cup of Hemlock Theatre. I will be your host for this episode, Ryan Borochovitz, and I'm joined today by a very special guest. She is the program manager for the Canada-Ireland Foundation and has recently just done a smashingly successful job at running the Bealtaine Theatre Festival. And I'm so excited to talk to her today about how that festival went, some of the intricacies of Irish cultural practice in theatre, perhaps, and curating works like this that will continue annually into the future, we hope. So today I am joined by Beatriz Lôbo Campos. Hi, Beatriz, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ryan. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing all right. Thank you so much for asking. Well, we're so happy to have you here on the Cup talking about this festival, but before we get into any of that, I have to ask you our favorite icebreaker question. What is in your cup today?
So in my cup right now is water because I've already drank 2 cups of coffee today. And it's very important to take a break.
Yes, I agree with that. I was contemplating having water in mine as well, but I decided to shake it up with some green tea. So that's what I have on the cup. Hey, well, what is the pattern on your cup? I see, or what does it say?
I've made a very specific choice. This is Irish. So I'm going to try not to butcher it, but it's Ishmael's cup of tea, which is basically says, I like tea.
Very appropriate, very on theme for the conversation we're about to have. So before we start talking about the Bealtaine Festival a little bit, you're our guest, and we always like to start a little bit with you and keep it personal. So could you maybe begin by just telling us a little about yourself, and particularly your relationship to theater and the arts? I always like to let the guest take the floor to dance with as they please, to define themselves as a theater artist or enthusiast or participant, however you see fit.
Yeah, I like to say a lot of the programmer that we're definitely enthusiasts. There's this producer in Ireland that she spent like 2 days figuring out how do we call a collective of programmers? And then she was like, I think I might call them opinions. And I was like, honestly? Yes. And I was like, honestly, that is better than my suggestion that was a murder programmers.
Like crows.
You know?
Yeah.
Exactly. The funny thing about this whole thing is that, like, as a programmer and a very enthusiast of theater, I also work with other mediums at the Canada Foundation. So the theater might be my little baby on all of this, but it's also part of thinking of Irish culture as a whole. So what I find interesting about theater is that it mixes a lot of what's best in Irish arts. It's like it have so many different ways of storytelling that they mash up, that they do it. And like one of the biggest things that we try to do here at the Canada Ireland Foundation is to show what contemporary Ireland is and not just like focus on the classics. You know, we're not making people read Ulysses all the time, although it would be nice.
Yeah, once a year on Bloomsday.
Exactly. Actually, Bloomsday's coming.
It is. How will you be celebrating it? Are you doing the whole tour around town, reading all the chapters?
I won't do the tour around town, but there is a Bloomsday event every year. So there will be one this year on the 16th at Hugh's room. So I'm hoping to go. Ulysses has just been in our view a little bit. There might be some spoilers for programming next year. So there's some interesting things related to Joyce coming along that are, I would like to say, accessible.
Okay, well, we can rejoice at that. Well, that's exciting.
Exactly. Hey. But like, I talked about many things, but not about myself.
Oh, yes, please. Return to yourself.
Yes, I know. Got to go back in. It's interesting because I worked mainly before starting working more of various mediums at the Canada Foundation. I work a lot in film programming. So it's just very interesting to be able to come and use those skills to all kinds of arts, because you start spending your notion of like how things can be done. You start thinking about how arts are actually multidisciplinary all the time. And then like even creating something as like the Bealtaine Theatre Festival, I'm also thinking like, okay, but there's a bit of music there. That's like we'll eventually talk about the Beautiful Birds, which like how music plays a huge part on it. And it's like how like certain visuals make part of like certain plays, as we had Story of a Day that is for young audiences. There's classic music in midst of narration and illustration. So it's just really nice as someone that like really enjoys the arts. It's just very happy to see different storytelling, that like to be doing this as my job. I think it's a huge privilege to be a program. There's a lot of responsibility at the same time.
I'm curious because programmer isn't usually one of the obvious arts jobs that when you're growing up thinking of being an artist that most people even know about, let alone gravitate towards. So at what moment did you either decide you wanted to be a programmer, realize that you were a programmer? What was the way that career path precipitated for you?
It realizes when I've admitted to myself I'm also a good producer, even though I hate producing, which I feel it's a path for a lot of producers.
Yeah, I would say so, yes.
Yeah. And it's that thing about understanding that for you to be able to see art that you want to see in the world, you also need to have those people that enable them to exist and like push for them to show up in different places, right? So I think like for me, the dawn of the programming was more like, oh, I can actually have a voice in this and give people a voice and give people a platform or things that I find relevant, right? So it's kind of, I don't know, it's always looking to think about the arts first in this business.
So when and how did you first get involved in the Canada-Ireland Foundation?
It's been 3 years. I came in as their events coordinator, which I thought was going to be just a small job so I could be doing projects on the side. But with the foundation growing and the chances of like being able to grow with it and also create your own vision for things. And also for me, it was just very interesting to dwell into Irish arts because I'm a Brazilian living in Canada programming Irish arts. So for me, it's nice to be able to sit somewhere else and be like, oh, this is a new room. You know?
Yeah, you bring up a fascinating point. I was curious if you had any kind of prior connection with Irish culture prior to becoming associated with this foundation, and what has that been for you?
Yeah, I think my only connection is that I was a crazy teenager that started trying to read Ulysses at 16.
In Portuguese?
That's the closest one. No, it was in English.
Okay.
It was nuts. Which like every time I talk to someone about it, like I was crazy. Like I'm pretty sure I only finished reading it when I was like 27, to be honest, because you're like, oh, I'll go back and I'll do this and I'll read it again. And I'm like, what am I doing? But no, it was just like a very interest in theater, learning new things, interested in film as well. And he was just like, okay, do you wanna jump into this? I'm like, yeah, why not? You know?
Right. That's really cool. Exciting. So, as we mentioned at the beginning, you are here today to discuss the Bealtaine Theatre Festival, which ran from April 25th to May 25th, 2025. This episode is a little different than usual with these types of things because it's not explicitly promotional. The festival has already come and gone. I still think there is value in talking about these things because, especially with the ephemeral art form of the theater, once it happens, then it's usually okay. We have our memories of it and it's gone, but then people seldom talk about it. The discourse around it seems to end. And I think that's unfortunate because you, as the programmer, all of the artists involved, put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into making this happen. And there is certainly something beautiful about the fleetingness of the moment and that it comes and goes. But at the same time, you still think that, oh, there is a tragedy or bittersweetness in that.
Yeah.
So
it's very Greek in that sense, right?
Yes, very much so.
If it starts with them, it starts with them.
Yeah, it depends on who you ask. I guess we could begin by how did this project become a thing? How did it come into being? What was the spark of it?
So we are as a foundation, we're growing. So we'll have the Corlick building next year. That's going to be our arts venture.
Mm-hmm.
And with the Corlick, what we wanted to do is to expand more programming. So basically what has been our dream for 2 years now is to actually have a yearly programming that revolves around Celtic festivals.
Mm-hmm.
The Bealtaine, which in Irish is May, but is also like this beginning of summer, like this year, like in community, you're getting like excited because it's not cold
Mm-hmm.
anymore, right? So we're like, okay, Bealtaine for us, we want to do the theater festival. This is just the spirit of it. We want to do it. So I just got very happy that this year most of the theater that we wanted to bring kind of fell on the same schedule. And I was like, this is it. This is how we're going to start this festival, because we've been doing programming around the city little by little. We had last year Panty Bliss and their show, If These Wigs Could Talk. We had a work by Luke Casserly called Distillation, which is this insane, amazing little show that you sit around this huge table with peat, with Irish moss.
Mm-hmm.
And then he talks about his relationship with the bog and like ecology and like you can touch the moss. And so it's like, we've been doing things before, but we hadn't like called it the Bealtaine.
Mm-hmm.
So this year was like, this is the moment of like birth in a sense of the festival. So we're excited about just the perspective of, oh, May is going to be the month of Irish theater. Right? That you can come to us and be like, you're going to be able to see different types of theater coming from us.
It's very interesting. I think what's coming to my mind based on what you're saying is you had like individual standalone pieces and you're getting the Irish cultural diffusion into this sort of Canadian landscape. But then there's something very different about just doing one at a time in a standalone matter versus making a festival, that there's a carnival environment or atmosphere, perhaps, of putting these things together, having a sense of curation and making an event more so than a particular episode out of it.
Yeah. And it's also like the biggest thing about our mandate is, and the big question is always like, how can we bring something so complex as a culture, right? In such small things. So like we believe that a festival gives at least that feeling. We can give you little tidbits. Like we can give you like a fringe show. We can give you like a kids show. We can give you a bigger, more traditional show. And you can get those little like bits and pieces of what Ireland is. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's kind of trying to be pragmatic at the same time. It's like, how can you be pragmatic, but at the same time have goals and dreams for the art in itself?
You're touching on something interesting, is that no country, let alone no country's culture, is a monolith in terms of the type of arts that it produces. So, and I think that's kind of interesting when we are forced to put these sort of quasi-nationalist parameters on the like, if these two pieces of art are so different from each other, what do they have in common? Well, they're both from Ireland, and therefore they are both part of this construction of what Ireland and its culture and its arts look like. There's a bit of a weird feedback loop there.
Yes. It's interesting because, again, me as someone who feel myself as an outsider looking in, mm-hmm. I also feel there's a lot of Irish arts that are similar to Canadian arts, but similar in the sense that they're trying to talk about the same thing in different ways. So there's a lot about it that I like. It is about also bringing these Irish arts to Canada to also be like, actually, we are somewhat similar. We're talking about those things, and there's a conversation that can happen. Mm-hmm. Like, because we can talk, like, for example, there's a Shaw Festival. It's named after another film. Like,
it is, yeah.
We have, So, like, you have Beckett Place being made around.
We're getting a very big Beckett season coming up. There's going to be a few
Beckett
of them.
Season. Yeah. It's like Oscar Wilde is having a renaissance, which is very timely.
Mm-hmm.
So it is those things about what Ireland has to offer is the conversation that Canada also has to offer.
Mm.
Like we're just trying to facilitate this conversation between countries and arts. I believe that this year is also the 200th anniversary of Thomas D'Arcy McGee, which is an Irishman that came to Canada and is also one of the founding fathers of Canadian Federation and like Constitution. And it's like there is so much conversation for good and bad also in a sense, because we also need to acknowledge like the Irish were also part of colonization at the same time. So it is these things about like it's Ireland and Canada, two countries that suffered colonization. They are talking about different cultures living in it. Like me as a Brazilian, for example, like Brazilians are the third major in Ireland. So it's like Irish people, Polish people, and then Brazilians. It's like we're everywhere. But it is this thing about like I look at it and I think of those shows every time that I see a show in Ireland. It's like, oh, this is actually very relevant. Just in general. It's just like for the world, I could show this to the world. This is a very good, interesting piece of art that has something to say.
No, it's very interesting. I'm also just thinking how you mentioned the similarities between Canadian culture and Irish culture. And I know this is something that often gets discussed in a theater history context, because in the 60s and 70s, Canada was trying to define its national identity because it had existed as a country for 100 years without a clear sense of who we are. Are we Britain? Are we America? What are we? This weird middle child between them.
Yeah.
And theater was a big part of that attempt to assert a very settler-oriented national identity project for what it means to be Canadian. And often there's like a lot of writings from the time of authors looking back to the Irish cultural renaissance of William Butler Yeats and Lady Gregory and John Millington Synge, as they created this national theater that asserted their identity. And we should be using that as a model to do the same for us. And I think if you're noting interesting similarities here, that maybe there is something that has already been borrowed from the Irish context. And as you mentioned, people like Thomas D'Arcy McGee, that Irish influence has kind of always existed in the Canadian, what gets called Canadian culture, Anglophone Canadian culture, perhaps writ large. I don't know if I have a point or a question to spin off of that, but you're giving me a lot of interesting thoughts about this.
Yeah, it's something that like at work and at the foundation is not even a question for us. It is just like, it feels this weird rhetorical question because it's like, it doesn't have an answer, but the answer is not like it's tangible. It's like, you know what the answer is. You can kind of feel it. You can kind of sniff it out that there's something there. It's like we are connected, but it's also like so much bigger and complex than this because it's culture, right?
Yeah.
And and I think that's where we try to come in with the arts. It is about finding those abstractions that we're all like, oh no, that makes sense. We just can't really pinpoint exactly why.
So walk me through a bit of how the curation process went. How did you decide what types of works should be included?
So one of the big things for us is that we are aware that we're the new kid on the block. Now we need to just get people to learn about us, to understand who we are, and kind of get interested in what we have to offer. And at the same time, we want to be different. Like we are right before Luminata. We're right after like a lot of the usual seasons are over. So what is our profile in Toronto? Not thinking Irish arts in itself. So one of the main things that we tried, and I think we achieved with this festival, was to bring pieces that you would not be able to see anywhere else. But they also had like I don't want to call them fringe, but it is in that fringe-esque in terms of they are one people show, like three people show.
Yeah.
And, but what they all have in common is that they're all very original. So, like, the King of All Birds uses it's probably one of the weirdest shows I've seen in the last 10 years of my life. It's like, for anyone just listening to this interview, it is weird. When I say it's weird,
I can attest to that because it's the one from the festival that I was able to see, and I loved it. I loved how weird it was, and I grooved with how weird it was, but it's strange and alienating.
But it is that kind of weird that you're watching and you're like, what's going to happen next? And then when it ends, you're like, oh, everything makes sense. And it's like, I think I remember Joy Nesbitt, who's the director, and Martha Knight, who wrote and acted in it. They were calling it weird girl shit. And I was like, honestly, it matches. But like, King of All Birds, extremely original. Tom Moran's a big, fat, filthy, disgusting liar. It like uses a trope of stand-up and completely subverts it. Like, if you come in expecting, oh, I'm going to be laughing my eyes out, and then at the end you're laughing and crying at the same time. You're like, oh my God. Like, Story of a Day is about a day on a kid's life. The most mundane, normal thing. But it's so magical that it made a room of 20 kids, like 2-3 years old, obsessed with it. Like, and anyone that like goes see kids shows, like, none of them went out to go to the washroom. That's how impressive it was.
That is a high bar to clear.
It's like, it's what I'm saying. It's like, it's crazy. I was like, they're so focused on it and they're so interested in it. And it's a simple concept, but done masterfully by Bronner, which Bronner is, I adore everything they do. And then we had the Librarian, which is goddamn hilarious. That is by Brew Theater. It's like as if the kids come into a library, and then like James, who's dressed as Lynn as the librarian, like is telling stories about bravery by using Irish author books. But it's that thing about like, oh, you're in the library, let's talk about this, talk about that. Like even the adults were cackling about it. Because it's just this like over the top thing. So it is what we wanted to do is to be like, we have a voice, we're showing it, and if you come see our shows, you're going to be coming out of it and thinking, oh, I've just seen something. Like I just saw something. Like this is something. Like I'm always of the idea that I want someone to come in, watch a show that we bring. And even if it's not really for them, they come out thinking, oh no, I saw something. I might have adored, I might have not adored, but I was like, it was really something, right? Because I think that's how you get people to interact, how you get people to kind of care about the arts, which is a complicated discussion nowadays. But it's also the best way to present good work. Good work is the one that you come out, you're like, I don't know my opinion yet, but I'm going to be thinking about this for a while.
Well, yeah, I regret that I wasn't able to see all of them. I only did see King of All Birds, but you make them all sound so interesting. Yeah, like if we could just dwell on King of All Birds for a little bit, because it is the one that I can.
100%.
That was such a bizarre, fascinating, exhilarating experience watching that piece, because like the sound design was amazing. Like she did like this cool looping audio stuff, played so many different instruments, and just told this like quasi-mythological story, which I don't know how much of it comes from perhaps actual Irish mythology, how much she made up. I'm not familiar enough with the sources to know, but
yes.
But yeah, and it all kind of just comes down to the fact that it's peculiar that many Irish households have these bird's eye view pictures of the very house you're in, and seems once we finally get the revelation that that's what sort of sparked this, like this whole show was reverse engineered from how do we explain that peculiar relationship to looking up, looking down, and what our relationship to the land means to our aspirations for the sky.
Martha's brain is impressive.
Mm-hmm.
I saw The King of All Birds. It's going to be 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
I saw it at the Dublin Fringe, which is amazing selection, I have to say, every year. And it was the first time I was going to the Dublin Fringe. I was just very excited to see everything. And I remember seeing that show on a midday run. And because I saw the poster, and the poster was Martha just screaming as if she was a bird. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go see what's going on with this. And I went in trying to figure out, is all of this that she's saying true? Are those lies? Are those not? So it's very comforting to me to know that, like, it was a normal reaction to the show. What I love about it is that when we get to the end, and I'm going to keep it with spoilers, like non-spoilery, because
is she still planning on touring it? Hopefully, will it come back?
That's what we're hoping.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's everyone in the room just started laughing because it is at the same time so cathartic and so, of course, that is the ending. It's just like this is crazy. But it's one of those shows that every single piece of information that she gives you is gonna get back, and it's gonna be. And I find it rare in storytelling nowadays for that to happen. And I say that everywhere, even in films, in which every single little piece of information given, even as much weird as it is going to come back.
Yeah, like, and you used a good image there of just like how her mind is. I forget the exact word you used, but just what a fascinating mind this artist has. Absolutely. And I had a rare experience that I was explaining this to the friend I went with after we were walking back from the show, is that it's very rare, but it's happened to me a few times where I see a show, usually at a fringe festival, where I feel like usually solo shows, the artist has shown me their entire soul or essence through this work of art. And often solo shows are trying to be like, hey, I have some very particular experience, let me tell you about that. Or they're like, my experiences can be extrapolated to a broader culture or something, so you'll learn something about that through my experience. But it's very rare, and I can maybe count on one hand the amount of times I felt this exact experience, and now this is one of them, of just like, this is so weird, but I feel like I now know you, not because you told me information about you, but I just see you. And I don't know if it's an accurate picture of what I see, but just the mind it takes to make a work of art like that feels like there's a nakedness to it. I don't know how to describe it. Yeah.
No, but it really is. And like when you start like just sitting down and talking to Martha's such I personally adore Martha's work. I'm very excited for her next work that I've been telling her, like, there's gotta be a trilogy at this point. Because she's working on something that is, the meme of they're like, I'm tired, I'm going back to the water.
No, I don't.
It's a very specific meme about this animal that I won't remember the name now, that it was the first one that like come out of the water.
Okay, right, in the evolution, so it's like tired going back in.
Exactly. So like I joke that for the King of All Birds, she was just like taking off the clothes. On this one, she's just going to start becoming the fish. And I'm like, I'm just very excited for this. But like Martha's also like, she's a musician first. She does so much sound design work in Ireland. And I think she did one, she was working in a version of the Tempest that like I heard amazing things about it. And like she has such like a ear for the sound and just thinking what is like true for these moments, right?
Yeah.
Like playing so many instruments. I'm pretty sure she has a bachelor in flute as well.
And
like
yeah, and excellent flute work, all of the instruments. Like you couldn't ask me which one, like watching it, you think is her like main instrument and which ones are secondary. Yeah. Like they were all, so good.
It's just, and it's at the same time, like at the part of the soul, it's also, I think that show is very Irish without being Irish. Because you can kind of go in knowing the jokes about the images, but you go in and you kind of see her soul and you understand her as an Irish person that had that lived experience. Mm-hmm. But it is in a sense so abstract. It's not like, oh, I come from Ireland, this. It is like, this is how it felt growing up and having these, like knowing about the wren and thinking about this and having these images and thinking about my country in that sense. So it is very interesting just how you see someone on all their layers.
Yeah, like I think what you're describing is similar to what I would say is the experience of reading James Joyce. Like it's not just you're being told about Ireland, but you feel Ireland. And me as somebody who's never been to Ireland, just contrary to what my first name would suggest, I have no like Irish culture or connection. My parents just like the name Ryan. But you read James Joyce or you see a show like Martha's and you're like, wow, there is something palpable of this. When I read or see a play by George Bernard Shaw, I don't feel Ireland in that. There might be a sense of Irish wit that comes from his cultural upbringing, but he kind of feels like an Englishman, and he sets his plays in various other cultures, but it takes a very kind of unique type of artist to tap into, something that feels like innately of that culture, which I guess brings me to an interesting question that I had. And unfortunately, maybe I would have a better answer for myself for this if I had been able to see the entire festival, but having only seen that show. You mentioned how you didn't want to use the word fringe per se, but that these are shows that are kind of like maybe on the periphery of the mainstream, that they sort of have a more scrappy feel to them. Do you want to comment on that before I get to the actual question to clarify?
Yeah. So when I say about it, because for example, I've seen The King of All Birds on the Dublin Fringe, and Tom Moore's show was also on the Dublin Fringe. Mm-hmm. But the Dublin Fringe is a very well curated, thought of. So there is this thing, and it's huge because the Dublin Fringe happens in September, and I think 2 weeks after it ends, the Dublin Theatre Festival starts. So it is the two big events of theater in Dublin. And every time that I go through the Fringe, it does not feel like those works are just, I made this small work and it has like a potential. That it feels like fully fledged work that you see. Like there's like an example for it is Hot House. Hot House was the show that was in the Dublin Fringe first 2 years ago, but it went to off-Broadway last year. So it's, when I say fringe is because we think of it and the structure is fringe. But even their fringe in Dublin is we're gonna do theater the best way that we can do theater.
Yeah, so I guess that to my question, because leaving a show like King of All Birds, it feels so strange. And me as somebody who doesn't have an immediate connection to Irish culture and certainly not contemporary Irish theater in a lot of ways, beyond just knowing playwrights like Edna Walsh and Martin McDonagh and Marina Carr. But I wonder, leaving that show, how representative is this of the current state of contemporary Irish theater? Is this something that people in Ireland think like, wow, I've never seen anything like that? Or is this kind of par for the course for the mainstream trends of how things look right now?
It's a good question. Mm-hmm. I think that answer is going to depend to who you talk with in Ireland. In that sense. I think The King of All Birds, as the example, is very much the kind of work that is normal between theater people, in the sense of like the people that like to go to the theater, like they're always at the Fringe, they're always at the GTF. They go to work Midsummer. There's the Galway Theatre Festival as well. They have the Barbaro, which is the children's festival in Galway. So it's goddamn so many festivals, which is good.
Yeah, festivals are good. We like them.
We like them. but it is interesting. I think to answer your question in a very loop around way.
Mm-hmm. Like the sound design does in the show.
Yes, very exactly. It's those shows. They're very different. Like the King of All Birds is what feeds other bigger things that will come. Because it's always from the brave and crazy ideas that you start moving towards other things, in which, like, I had mentioned Hot House before. Hot House is the big production, but I feel that those shows, they kind of talk about the same thing in different ways. Mm-hmm. So it's hard to talk about a show that no one has seen. Like, but it is, like, it's just an example of how the way that you talk about the same thing, it's just one feeds the other. Mm-hmm. Like, it is a very interesting environment in Ireland. I think also the advantage of being smaller, that you can see more stuff. You can actually, like, be in contact with more people. Right. So it is answering the question in a very roundabout way. Mm-hmm. It is one feeds the other, right? They're always in that communication of, oh, we have the very weird things, but the weird kind of communicates with the tradition, and the tradition communicates with the weird, and they coexist really well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's an excellent answer that I think really does address the complexity of such a complex feedback loop between the periphery and the center, and how these things engage with each other and influence each other. Another question that I have, kind of spinning off of this type of thing, is when you bring works like this to Canada in the context of something like the Bealtaine Festival, who do you think of as your target audience? Is this work that is primarily being brought to Canada to give Irish Canadians a taste of their own culture from back home? Or are you more interested in perhaps exposing non-Irish Canadians to a cultural experience that's quite different from what they would already know or would expect?
Technically, it's both.
That makes sense.
But it's like the ideal and the beautiful world is both. But we are also very aware that we are a Canadian organization that deals with Irish arts. And the big goal really is to be able to bring anyone to come see the show. Like, the end goal of all of this is that people will look at our festival and going to be, oh, I saw something really good last year. My friend told me about it. I'm going to trust what they have. Let's go see this. And they can see different things. Mm-hmm. So I think in general, the goal is people that are interested in different stories, whatever it might be. Because I think also with theater, sometimes it's nice to be able to have specific different pieces that will bring one person just for that. Right. But that piece will be great for them, you know? So I try to think in a holistic way of, like, how can I just get this art in front of the right people that will enjoy this.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. In terms of getting it to a lot of different people, one of the issues that I'm sure you became very acutely aware of doing a festival like this, and particularly with having such short-running shows back-to-back on here, is that it can be difficult to, one, get a lot of people to know about it in time and then find time in their schedule during those limited runs to be able to see it.
Yeah.
And particularly difficult to get critics to come to review it. Often when a show has a short run, and I say this speaking as somebody who does a lot of criticism both here on the Cup and for other publications, you receive an invite, come review this show, and like, well, by the time I can see it, write the review and get it out, the run will be over. So I'm better off putting my resources elsewhere, and sorry. And then maybe if you're lucky, we'll throw you an interview or something instead. Hey, maybe that's how this came about. But I do think, there is something difficult about that. I understand. I don't envy your task as a producer to have to figure out how to accommodate and house these shows and get them for a run that you hope will make back its money, and that can be difficult. But what did you find was the reaction to the brevity of these runs? And I could ask more about the criticism itself, like the kind of reviews you received, but maybe just start there.
Yeah. So there's the very practical question in which we were prepared for it. Mm-hmm. We are aware, especially because this is the first edition. We understood that most of it is, let's get this in front of people so that when the next couple of years, when people hear about it, they have an idea what it is already. There is a recognition. Mm-hmm. So there is that very practical side of, we need to start.
Right. Canary in the coal mine. To use another bird metaphor.
Not a bird metaphor. Let's find birds. So in the very practical way, we were aware of it. We're very glad how it went. We learned a bunch of little details and things. There's a lot that we know will change once we have a home, as we'll be doing the Corlett, because then at least the festival is not in different parts of the city. It's going to be in one place. Yeah. So that definitely helps. One thing, it might be controversial, but the reviews necessarily for the run here as a festival, they are amazing for the artists. But as a festival, I think people are looking to take a chance. Right. Festivals, like the ambience of a festival is for people to take a chance and be like, oh, there's different things. Let's figure this out. So this is kind of the approach that we take when we think about festivals. Mm-hmm. It's about being, oh, this is happening. Let's go see it here. Let's go do this. This is happening. So it is a very different approach in that sense. We are a small festival that are having weekend runs. Maybe one day we'll get a run just like Fringe style in which we have plays every day. Mm-hmm. That's future goal. But we're trying to be very practical in what can we do in the first years and how to best at the same time to give to our audiences and to our artists. Right. Because it makes sense to also bring an artist and be like, okay, you're going to be running the whole week just so we can get a review, but you're going to get 10 people each day. Mm-hmm. You know, you have to have those balances and you have to figure out where are you allowing to hurt now so the other things can foster. These other things can grow. Right. So that is the huge practicality.
No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I love what you said about how the nature of a festival is taking a chance on something. And I think that's actually something that we've certainly here in our Toronto context. I don't know what it's like elsewhere as much, but I think we have been losing that a little bit, especially there's been a lot of discourse lately, some of it taking place on Reddit, where people are talking about how they're raising the prices for Fringe, or they raised it last year, but the prices are getting too high for individual shows, which, again, I don't envy the producerial decisions that went into making this, because it needs to be sustainable, and especially with something like Fringe, where the proceeds of the tickets go to the artists, and it has to be worth their while to run these shows. But at the same time, it becomes, I won't say prohibitively expensive to see certain shows, but it necessitates seeing less if the price keeps going up. And as a result, people are putting a lot more stock in what the reviewers have to say about a show and won't necessarily buy all their tickets for the whole Fringe until they start seeing good word of mouth or good press. And Fringe has always kind of operated on a word of mouth sort of basis, which is something that with a short weekend run like you're doing is difficult to get, because I was telling everybody King of All Birds is amazing. When does it end? Tonight. Can you go? No, I can't go tonight. Well, then I'm sorry, you're going to miss it.
Yeah.
But yeah, these kinds of environments that I agree with you should be in the essence of come see it, take a chance. You never know what you'll see. And I'm so glad I did with that one show. And I wish I could have been able to catch more of them, but there's a lot of other things happening and during the very brief runs. But yeah, I guess let's talk a bit about some of the reviews you did receive. How much coverage did the actual festival get in the individual shows?
So we got like smaller indie coverage, but we got, as they say, like quality versus quantity.
Right.
The reviews that we got were really good reviews. We were very happy, just like that people came to see it, that they gave a chance, and that they left. And there's certain reviews that I'm thinking about printing them because I'm like, oh, they got what the show is about. I'm just so happy that this happened, right? And it feels like a baby, even though the show's not mine. But it's that thing of kind of like maybe an auntie that is
or
like,
a midwife, perhaps.
Oh, look at them! I love this. They're beautiful babies. They're amazing. But even to the point that you said that you were like, oh, you need to say King of All Birds. But for example, doesn't that give you more of a chance of like, if I give you a weird one next year,
right,
that you're not going to show up?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, but that's a long cycle to have to wait, which builds a lot of anticipation. But yeah.
But it is that thing about having patience, and you kind of have to have in this industry. And even with the reviews, like I tried to talk with most of the reviewers that were coming in. It should be like, if you have any questions, you can ask me or anything like that. It's to create those relationships and be like, we are available. If you have other questions, you want to talk about this, or if you want to come see this other show this other time, I can offer you something different. So it is a lot about offering the best that we can. It is about, I hate the word customer service because it feels to that, but it is customer service.
Audience outreach.
Yes.
That's the cleaner version.
But it's the thing about, you go out, you want to have a good time, but I also want to give you a time to remember, not in a Disney cruise, a time to remember, something like that. It is like, oh, this was like worth my time. I really enjoyed being here in this moment and doing this. This brings me community. This brings me joy. That the idea is to always have someone leave content with what was offered, what they experienced. And that comes from thinking from the shows, thinking from like how we talk with them, like we're a small operation. I was dealing with tickets, and it's like, at least for now dealing with tickets, like next year at the building, I won't be dealing with tickets.
That's good.
And I'm like, which is nice, but it's like, I know that from my habit, I'm going to be around, like, and be like, hey, it's like talking to people. Did you enjoy it? How was this? How was that? Because it is part of just understanding how people feel, and it is the big part of it as well. So I kind of grabbed your question of the reviews and just did it.
No, I love all the, well, because what you're describing and attesting to here isn't just the actual like published, whether online or in print, reviews that validate the work because somebody who does this, whether as their job or as a side thing, took the time to write about it, think about it, talk about it. But I think what you're attesting to is there is a broader sense of reception beyond just the actual validating apparatus of the critics, that the audiences you speak to have a similar factor to that. I don't know. Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Yeah. And it's not saying that the reviews aren't important. Like, reviews are an important part of the ecosystem, but being practical in the sense, I know that we need to think a little beyond reviews just because we're short term, we are a festival. So it's just being very practical about what we can achieve and how to achieve it well.
And I will also add, from a theater history perspective, reviewers don't always get it right. Like, so much of what goes down in theater history, as J.M. Singh could tell us, are the things that spark a riot and create a big uproar that everybody hates upon its original reception, but then kind of goes down in history. They often say that theater history is written in riots, and you should be attentive to the things that create an uproar that aren't immediately well received because maybe they were onto something. They're pushing against the accepted norms of what is good theater. Like, I loved King of All Birds, and if I were writing a review of it, I would have said, like, this is amazing, go see this show, this is how good everything was. But I could very easily picture another critic hating it because it is such a jarring, alienating piece. And that could be very detrimental if you're trying to rely on those reviews to sell tickets, but it might bode well for it in the long run in terms of you want to have that show that people initially met with resistance because maybe that's an indicator of good things to come from it.
Yeah, that's horrible to say, but it's the old, like talk about me.
Right.
Doesn't matter.
Yes, all publicity
time.
is good publicity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think the kind of ugly dark side of that is that it gives good fuel for validating people who do bad things and bad work because, society just can't deal with me and how transgressive I am, which we see a lot of like old white comedians using this argument for why they should be racist or sexist or transphobic. And it's like always awful. And the perhaps softer but still not great dark side of it as well is the fact that it valorizes being hated as an aesthetic good. And I think it also that like it makes people fetishize the life of a starving artist. Like, I'm just not appreciated in my time, but history will prove me right. But if you're trying to make this your career and support yourself doing it, then you can live a very, like, Van Gogh is the obvious example that kind of people point to of like, yes, he sold like one painting during his lifetime to his brother. Nobody appreciated it. Look at him now. But you don't want to be Van Gogh. Maybe some people do, but you shouldn't want to be living that life.
No. I know. To be honest, I don't want the artist that we bring to be living that life. So
yes,
that's definitely
yes,
not making them starve and suffer.
Yeah, and it is very unhealthy to kind of have the mentality that don't worry, people don't get your work. You are actually the genius. Enjoy your starvation in the meantime. You will be vindicated when they write the history of it all. Yeah.
I know. Hey, we just need self-awareness. We have self-awareness. We go somewhere.
And pragmatism, as you've said many times, that you are very reasonable. If you are bringing the artists from another country over an ocean, it has to be somewhat worth their while financially, if nothing else, to at least break even doing this, if not make a profit, which is, you're asking a lot of them to possibly have very little returns. And I don't say that to put that pressure on you, but I think you are the kind of person who takes that seriously in your crucial activity of making this happen and caring for the artists who you bring under your wing, to use yet another bird metaphor.
Yes, another bird metaphor. Exactly. Yeah, no, but like even The King of All Birds is a good example. It's a play that I've just championed the first time that I saw it. Mm-hmm. And like after 2 years of like, I got them over here. Mm-hmm. I was like, I don't care if like the Irish Arts Center in New York doesn't want to put you guys, I'm going to put you guys. Because I know you're a good play. And it's just kind of defending your aesthetic choice in that sense.
No. And I think that's good. And it takes bold programmers like yourself to have the opinions and the murder behind you, fueling these kinds of tough decisions that maybe, you encounter resistance sometimes with them. Maybe you just are able to push through single-mindedly, but you're able to make it happen, and we can thank you for the brilliant art that has made its way across this ocean under your watchful eye.
Try my best.
Are there any other lessons from this first festival that you're taking with you into your plans for next year's?
Good question. I think there's a lot of just like little things. I think it's, for example, I've always been very interested in partnerships. And so I think that's something that we're going to lean a lot next year, but but mostly also like to reach people, right? Like there is that thing about, hey, I'm bringing this great piece of theater. Do you also want to be part of it? Mm-hmm. I do also want to do this. So there are certain conversations coming out of this, which was great, because the good thing about bringing the plays is that I can also bring people to see them and be like, hey, now that you see that this is great and they're doing great work, let's talk about something else, right? Let's talk about the future. Mm-hmm. So it is those little things about, if you're doing theater, doing it live is always best.
Yep.
As much.
It's usually considered a constituent element, but but I know the pandemic changed things, and there's always been mediatized experiments with theater that got very much accelerated by the Zoom theater movement that we all were forced to live through. But
and again, I think like a lesson that I learned is that Toronto is very well used to seeing or like comfortable in seeing weird stuff.
Nice.
Like we said the word weird so much,
Mhm.
but we have so much traditional theater in the sense of proscenium. We're doing the theater there, but I'm very happy that like bringing the King of All Birds, it is in front, but it is also this very weird experience. Like I want to try bringing more like cube spaces, more interactive stuff. I'm not promising that we'll bring them, but there's very interesting work. Like there's a work called Volcano that is a 4-hour dance theater piece. That the first time it was in New York last year, first time I went to see it, I was like, I'm going to hate this.
I heard about this one actually, but sorry, continue.
It was the best 4 hours of my life. I was like, I don't know how I would pitch this because this is insane. Like they gave us sandwiches. Like that's like a minute of show, but Volcano changed me.
Wow.
You know, it's just incredible. And so you have those weird, like very interesting pieces that we want to be able to bring, we want to be able to do, but to do fair for the piece and for the artist, we want to do it in partnership.
Right.
Like our goal is not to be, oh, we are going to be the best theater. I just want to bring the best art for the artist for people to see.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't have ego in that sense, in that fight of being like, oh, I am bringing all of this. Like I'm like, no, this show is good. Let's figure out a way other people to see.
Right. Are there specific theater companies you've already been perhaps communicating with or have in mind to partner with? Or is that not something you should talk about yet? If it hasn't been
should keep it quiet a little bit. But we're communicating. I hope that October this year we can already release our festival set for next year.
Nice.
That will be in our brand new building.
How early do you begin the process of deciding which shows or attempting to bring that curation together?
So we're finally, again, because it's been a process, we're finally on a year ahead basis.
Oh, okay. So you already basically know next year's festival, what's going to be
I basically know. Mm-hmm. I just need to get approved.
Right. So you cannot disclose here anything we're likely to see?
No, as much as I would love to, because I'm very excited, especially because with the opening of the Corliss next year, we are very aware that we gotta come in with a bang.
Yes.
So we're like, do not worry, you will have your weird piece. I promise.
I would expect nothing less from you at this point, and from the nation of Ireland.
And from the nation of Ireland, it might be related to birds as well. Who knows? We'll figure that out.
Intriguing.
Intriguing. We're also going to expand. We're going to be more complicated Irish words because we're going to have our Lunasa festival. That is going to be music. And if you look how to write Lunasa, it has nothing to do with how I'm saying it. There's more consonants than vowels.
Yeah, go to the website to find out how it's pronounced.
Go to the website and exactly. So next year is going to be a very interesting year just for arts that we're bringing. It's going to be fun.
Well, that's amazing. I look forward to attending as much of that as I'm able to. And I encourage anybody listening to this, if you've made it to the end of this conversation, you must be intrigued by this. So I hope you will also make an effort to see much of this because it really is exciting work that I think we're very lucky to have. And we're very lucky to have you and the Canada-Ireland Foundation bringing it to us. Thank you for doing what you do and taking the time to talk to me today about all of this.
It was a lovely conversation. Thank you for taking the time to hear me just peel a bunch of Yes.
And it's wonderful. And I especially do appreciate, I know we talked at the beginning about how this is unconventional to do this conversation after the fact because it's not promotional. People listening are probably like, oh man, I really wish I'd heard this before so I could see the King of All Births and everything else from the festival. But I think there is something useful about this sort of reflexive, what can we say about the pieces that were put on, what we've learned from them. And I hope you feel that this has been an exciting springboard into your next piece or the next festival.
No, 100%. I think we in the industry should be talking more about the intricacies of doing these things.
Yes.
And making those decisions.
Very much so.
We keep it very quiet between ourselves. There's a lot of conversations to be had on how different people do it in different countries and how they think. Mm-hmm. So I think it's just good to be able to talk about this is my thought process.
Yes. And it is definitely a different conversation after it's come and gone as opposed to before going into it. So, and the fact that you are already beginning to plan the next one, you are in this interesting middle zone of cannibalizing those experiences into new revelations.
Oh, yeah. Anthropophagy is definitely a good word.
Ooh, exciting. Yes, that's one you don't hear very often.
If you talk to Brazilians that deal with arts, you're going to hear anthropophagy a lot.
Oh, really? Yes. Is that just the more accurate, Brazilian or Portuguese translation of cannibalism that is used instead?
It's more because our modernist movement in Brazil in the beginning of the last century was called the Anthropophagy movement.
It was the cannibal movement, or man-eating movement, to be more technical about it, because a shark eating a human is also an anthropophagist. So
that is true. That's true. Yeah. Yeah, because a lot of our modernist movement was, we're going to eat the European customs and arts and techniques, and we're going to create something of our own. So I just really like putting that out there because it's just a really good way of thinking that we should just try to bring more Brazil out there.
That's what you've taught me so much about Ireland and Irish theater today, and now look at you with this coda on Brazilian theater and its modernist movement. So thank you so much.
Well, just a little tidbit, just the Wikipedia, and then we can start going more.
Yeah, you got to get it in there somewhere. Wonderful. Before we sign off, I'll give you this opportunity to plug where people can learn more about the Bealtaine Festival and Canada Ireland Foundation. Do they have social media handles, website, if you'd like to plug any of that here?
Do. So you guys can find more about us on CanadaIrelandFoundation.com. Very easy peasy. Canada Ireland Foundation is also a handle on Instagram. So that's the good thing about our name is that easy to find the handles.
Nice.
It makes so much sense. We will have a talk with Irish Canadian author Emma Donoghue on this month of July. If this interview comes out before Sunday, July 8th.
It will. Haha.
It will. That's perfect. Because Emma Donoghue is just a great author. And then she's also with a musical play at the Blythe Festival this year.
Yes.
Yeah. So there's just a lot of interesting things happening. And we'll be opening the Corlick, which is right in front of the Billy Bishop Airport in March next year. And Bealtaine starts at the Corlick in May 2026.
Yes.
So that's going to be a vibe.
Start the countdown now. That's going to be very exciting.
Countdown now. Yeah.
And before we go, also, would you care to plug your own social media handles or website or places where if people are interested in you and your work, they can keep touch with you? Don't feel like you have to if you'd rather not.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, which might be the easiest one. So it's going to be B_LOOBOO because my name is very common in Brazil and getting that handle is hard. You will see a lot of dog pictures, but I also share a lot of the stuff that I see in Ireland and taking a look on shows.
So it's an inside glimpse to your curational process as it's happening.
Just a little bit as I'm going. I've been feeling the vibes as we go.
Okay. Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. Once again, if anybody likes us and our work, we are at COH Theater on Facebook, Twitter, not calling it the other thing, and Instagram. We are Cup of Hemlock Theater on YouTube, where you might be watching this, or Cup of Hemlock Theater podcast and all the podcast places where you might be listening to this with your ears. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, thank you for this lovely conversation about the Bealtaine Festival, and I'm so looking forward, after everything you said. If I wasn't already excited, I am even more so excited for next year's festival.
Perfect. Season tickets for you.
Oh, exciting. I'm going to hold you to that. Cheers. Bye. Cheers.